Here's a simple lesson that you can teach kids, but it's also kind of a craft, that an activity they can do at the same time. But it has a great lesson, and I hope you'll consider using it with your kids. It's really simple. You've done it before. It's taking a piece of paper, folding it, and then cutting it to make a snowflake. And so as you get the paper ready, you just trim off the top and you make it very straight across the top, and you have a piece that's this perfect little triangle. But when you open it up, it's a pretty boring looking snowflake. In fact, it's almost round. But to make it into a snowflake, we have to do some trimming, some cutting. The same way when God is working in us, He uses all kinds of things in our lives to trim us, to discipline us, to prepare us. So what are some of the things that God uses to discipline us? Maybe some difficult things, some hard things that happen to us. And I'll stop and ask kids for some examples. And yeah, there's some problems in your family, and maybe something really difficult has happened, and there's been some arguments or some problems with family members, and it feels like there's part of the family has been cut away or damaged. What else has happened? Yeah, somebody got really sick in the family, and there was some illness, and right at the top of this, there's like this piece that gets cut away, and it hurts. It's painful trying to figure out how we're going to deal with that. What else can you think of? Yeah, there's friends, and friends sometimes say and do some hurtful things, and it's like they're cutting away a little piece of you, and it hurts. It's difficult to deal with. Anything else you can think of that's been really difficult in your life? Yeah, that time you got in trouble. You made a wrong choice, and you were grounded, and you had to. There was some problems you had to go and make up for and apologize, and so we will cut those things out, and those are really difficult things in your life. But not just bad things happen. Sometimes good things are happening, but they're just hard for us to deal with. What are some good things are good for you, but they're just tough? They feel like discipline. Yeah, you have to exercise. Some of you belong to sports teams, and you have to run laps, or you have to do exercises, and those things they don't feel good. We don't like them when they're happening to us, but we know they're for our good. What else happens to us that doesn't feel good but we know is important? Yeah, homework. We know we have to study. We know there's things we have to do, and so we even though we don't like it, we do it because we know that it's important and we have to do it. Yeah, chores, the things around your house, the things that discipline you and train you at home as your parents are working in your life. They're working and teaching you some things, and even those things, they're not very fun. And so we see that actually there's lots of stuff in our life that seems difficult and painful, and we don't always enjoy those things, but we know that they're good for us. And it's like making this little snowflake. We're cutting out some pieces. Some of it has been really difficult, painful, hurtful things, and others have been things that we knew were good for us, but we still didn't enjoy doing them. And it's sort of like what God is doing in us. He's working in us. He's using all these things, and what started out as this nice, smooth little triangle now has pieces that have been cut away, and things that have been disciplined in our lives. But when we open it up, when we begin to see what thing God has done in us, pretty soon we see that what He's made, what He's worked in us, turns out to be something pretty amazing. There's a couple of scriptures that talk about that. In fact, do you remember when Joseph was at the end of his life, after he'd been through so many difficult things? Joseph was met by his brothers, who started the whole thing by not liking him and selling him into slavery, and he ended up in prison and all those things. At the end of his life, when Joseph had been promoted to Pharaoh's assistant, and his brothers came in and they thought, oh no, he's going to remember all the hurtful things that we've done. Joseph looked at his brothers and said, what you intended to hurt me, God intended for good. Because God wanted to accomplish something pretty amazing. It seemed painful at the beginning, but what God has done is something pretty amazing. Romans 8:28 says that we know that all these things are working together for good to those who God has called according to his purpose. See, God has a bigger picture. God has a bigger plan. And all those things that happen to us, the good things, the hard things, the difficult things, even the bad things, God is using all of them, working them together, and he's making something pretty amazing in our life. We have to trust that God has a purpose and has a plan. In 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17, God talks about his word being alive and powerful and working in us. And it says his word is good because it's doing 4 things. One, it's teaching us the right way to go. When we hear God's word and it kind of like, oh, that's hard to hear, God is teaching us. And then he's disciplining us or rebuking us when we get off course. He says, I have to discipline you. And that seems hurtful and painful at the moment. But what God is doing, something pretty amazing. He's working in us. And then it says he's correcting us. He's showing us how to get back on track. God is teaching us how to repair the relationship and correct our behavior. And then last, he's training us in righteousness. He's teaching us what to do next time when that same thing happens. And the reason he's doing all of that, it says, so that you will be thoroughly equipped for every good work. So God says, I want to get you ready to do everything I have planned. So I'm working in you, I'm disciplining you, I'm correcting you. All the things that are happening to you are for a purpose, and they are, if you'll trust me, they are working in you to make something really good come of your life. So then we'd let kids begin to make their own snowflake together. It's really simple, and you teach them to do it, and as they're making their own cuts, they're talking about specific things in their lives that have helped to shape them. And you start with a regular piece of paper, and you want to fold it down, make it square. And so what you do is you fold one corner down, and then you cut off the bottom, and you end up with a triangle that's perfectly square. It's like this, and then you take the folded part in half, and then you fold it in half again, and you come up with a triangle. Then the trickiest part is then folding it into thirds. And so you want to fold it so that it ends up being in 3 parts, kind of like this, and about 30 degrees for each of them. And when you fold them and fold them again, they should line up like this. And then what I do is turn it over so I can see the lowest point over here, and I just cut straight across and start there. You could probably see that I drew some pencil lines on this so that it will help me as I'm doing the devotional to know where to cut. And so I know I'm going to come up with a decent design. So I hope you'll think about using this activity that's really a devotional and an activity to help kids understand difficult things. This is also a good activity for some kids who have been through a really tough time. Some really hurtful things have happened in their home or in their family, and they're just trying to process it, and it'll help them begin to talk about those things and see them from God's perspective and what God may be doing in their life. And maybe they'll get a little bit of vision about what God ultimately has planned for them, as God is working all those things for their good and his glory. Let's try it and see what happens.